What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Elliot and this is MovieFiles. As you can see from the title of this video, this is an open spoiler discussion for Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Now, as I'm recording this video, I've only seen it one time, but you might see me looking down every now and then, but I have on my phone the entire film. So we're going to get into what to expect in this video, but before we get into today's breakdown, if you all haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that notification bell. That way you can stay up to date with all my daily content. You can also give your boy a follow on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. All those links can be found in the description of this very video. But speaking of this video, if you enjoyed today's discussion, make sure you're giving the video a thumbs up as well as sharing it. But more importantly, now that the film is out, let's talk about all things Black Panther Wakanda Forever, all things spoilers, what worked, what didn't work, favorite moments, least favorite moments, mid-post credit scene, and what do you want to see next from this particular franchise. I'm talking the series that they've announced. I'm talking Black Panther 3. Do we want Ryan Coogler back as the director? What do we expect from the Black Panther moving forward? Let's have all those discussions in the comments below. So I just want to set the expectation for what you can see in this video. I don't know, this might be 20 minutes, this might be 30, hell, this might be an hour long. We'll see at the end of the video how long we'll be discussing this. But I say all that to say this will not be as structured as some of my other videos. And if you prefer structured videos, because again, the YouTube algorithm, this might be your first time watching one of my videos, which again, welcome to the community. But if you're part of the community, I've done this quite a few times where I do have a structured, more well thought out video on the channel that you can check out to get my thoughts on this film. But this is more of a discussion with you all, and I plan on having maybe one or two more of these. If you're watching this video now, let me know in the comments. The plan is, if time allows it, to do a live stream. Open callers can call in, anyone can come in. I'm going to share the link to, which I've done on the channel before, share the StreamYard link, and you can come in and share your thoughts on the film. We might do that on Monday. If that's something you all will be into, let me know in the comments. Like, yes, Elliot, I would want to do a live stream discussion, and you would be open to maybe joining the discussion and having your thoughts being shared on screen. So this video is just me talking to you all about what I liked about the film, what I didn't like about the film, because I couldn't get into details in my spoiler-free review. So this is what this video is for. It's just open discussion. And just as, again, it won't be as structured. I don't have many edits in my videos as there is, but from the occasional ums and ahs and all that stuff. But this would be a me to you talking about Black Panther Wakanda Forever. So get prepared. Hope you have your drinks, have your snacks. Let's get into it. So listen, I gave my review. Again, you can see my review on the channel, my score of the film. And there was a couple things that I had mentioned that I couldn't elaborate on that we're going to be talking about in this video, about decisions that were made that I just can't wrap my mind around. Now, we're going to talk about, recasting T'Challa. We're going to talk about the use of Shuri and Riri and the direction and things that didn't work and all that different stuff. So let's just start off by opening up the film. We all know that this was coming in regards to Ryan Coogler, Namor, and the other actors in this film have openly said that this was their way to honoring Chadwick Boseman. They felt as though to allow the real-life unfortunate situation of losing Chadwick Boseman and injecting that into this film, and in their eyes and from their words, this is their way to honoring him. As this film tackles grief, there is really no blueprint of how we can handle losing someone. They felt as though putting their real life emotions, their real life connection to Chadwick, and injecting it into this fictional story, into these fictional characters. And not to prolong the breakdown here, and this is not to be meant to be disrespectful to Chadwick Boseman, because that was, not to get too sidetracked, but I don't get too emotionally invested in celebrities that I've never met. But there's been 3 times in my life that I've physically got emotional after hearing that a celebrity passed away. Aaliyah, Kobe Bryant, my favorite athlete of all time, and Chadwick Boseman. I cried. I got emotional when I heard that they died. So this is I understand the emotions. But the thing about comic books and the things about fictional stories is these characters live on forever. Hence why this character is still being written in comics today. Putting that aside, I am a full supporter of recasting T'Challa. Again, I've said it in previous videos. I have a video on this channel now with 30 minutes of my reason and why I feel that way. You can check out that video. You can also check out my man, E-Man from E-Man Movie Reviews, who breaks down the reason why we want to see the character of T'Challa to be moved on. But I say all that to say, We knew that this was coming in the film, and we immediately opened the film with the passing of T'Challa. As we break down the scene here, we see Shuri is running around to try to synthesize and recreate the herb to give to her brother. We hear the AI saying that his heart rate is slowly but surely going down. She's upset. She's trying to figure it out. As her mother walks up to her and says, he's gone. Now, obviously, just again, this is what this video is going to be. This is my raw emotions to you all. It hit me. And that's the thing about putting in the real life circumstance and essentially kind of opening up that wound again. Again, I wasn't obviously there when he passed away, and obviously we know that he was with his closest family and friends when this happened to him in reality. But when just hearing those words, he's no longer with us, I just couldn't help but to bleed into. And again, I know art is sometimes imitates reality, and I know a lot of actors and directors, they channel their personal lives into a role, into a script. I get all that, but sometimes some things just need to have a fine line. But neither here nor there, when we get that fatality, that ending, that he's gone, it hit me. Not even including the credits has the tribute to T'Challa and the tribute to Chadwick Boseman. It really affected me immediately off the bat. But then just kind of talking about the film analytically and kind of talking about the scene, I mentioned in my spoiler-free review that I appreciated the tribute. I appreciated the honoring of Chadwick and also the honoring of T'Challa and how it had its ramifications throughout their narrative. But one thing that still kind of doesn't really add up to me, taking away the comics as far as Wakanda. Wakanda has solved a lot of things that mortals deal with on a regular basis, figuring out the cure for cancer, we even saw it in the MCU, right, with Everett Ross getting shot in the back and essentially probably being paralyzed, but we know they have the technology to heal him, which we saw in that film in 2018. When we hear throughout the movie that he suffered, T'Challa, from a undisclosed illness, in my mind, I'm like, this is the issue with putting in the reality to your fictional story. Putting the comics aside, you've established that Wakanda is beyond everyday human medicine. That whatever the clothes, and I would assume it was probably cancer. They don't identify it, nor did I need them to say he died because of cancer or he died because of whatever. But I'm assuming that's how he died in this film, in this interpretation of the character no longer being with us. So it was just kind of like it's a tough pill to swallow, knowing that they have all the resources to their disposal. And also to say this in Wakanda, they're not immortal. There are things that they just will accept death because we know in their culture, death isn't final to them, right? You go on and you continue on through the sexual plane and in the spirit and all the stuff they believe in. So I get all that death isn't how we death is interpreted in many different cultures and how you perceive it. But when they said he died from a disclosed illness, and I'm just thinking of Wakanda, and especially this isn't just a regular person. This is your king. This is your protector. This is the Black Panther. This is T'Challa. It just seemed a little bit weird, especially when, and I'm kind of jumping ahead here, when we find out that he knew of his illness. And again, this is when it messes with my mind when they blend in the reality of what happened to him. He only kept it to his close quarters. Nakia knew about this. He knew about this. Hence what she says to Shuri at the end. He knew that he was coming to an end. We want to keep this, what we'll talk about, Prince T'Challa later, keep this a secret. Versus Shuri saying he's begging for his life. It all just was it's a lot to take in. So I just want to know in the comments now, how did you feel about the handling, the disclosed illness of the character, and just how they immediately open with that? But going back to the positives, I did appreciate the handling of the ceremony, the funeral, him going into the ship. All that stuff to me was handled pretty well. And as we see Shuri, she's dealing with it a lot heavier than everyone else, right? And that's kind of the big theme too. Again, grief comes in so many different shapes and forms, and there's not a set path on how you can handle someone passing. Of course, there's books and self-help books on how to deal with it, but everyone's different. we see as she's walking through the aisle, she's visibly upset, and she's just kind of this whole mindset. This is kind of stemming. She's suppressing this, and it's coming out in a much different way than like her mother and other people celebrating this, right? And celebrating the life of T'Challa. So we see all that happening. I will say, for a second there, I thought to myself, I wonder why there are no other Avengers attending his funeral, because I think about Tony Stark's funeral and how everyone from the Guardians, T'Challa was there, Nick Fury was there, Spider-Man. I mean, you guys seen it in game. Everyone was there, right? That meant something to Tony. I was just kind of curious. I was surprised that Sam Wilson, who has had his, conversations. We never seen a conversation with him or T'Challa, but they gave him his wings and, Falcon and Winter Soldier. I was surprised that, hell, Nick Fury wasn't there. So that was kind of shocking to me, because I took that celebration of his life as Ryan Coogler relating it to the comics. For those that remember the celebration of him and Storm marrying each other, everyone and their mom was there, right? So I was just, and not that I needed it, but I was just surprised that they didn't have, because this film does definitely want to have MCU connections, which I thought was a detriment to this film, but I was just surprised that no one else attended this particular funeral and the celebration. But all that being said, let me know in the comments now, how did you like the ending or the beginning? What worked, what didn't work? Let's have those discussions in the comments. So fast forwarding, we find out that we're a year ahead. We jump a year ahead. And for those taking notes at home, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they're saying that T'Challa passed away shortly after the events of Endgame, which, if I'm not mistaken, was in 2023 in the MCU timeline. So that means that we are in 2024. And if my memory serves me right, there was an article that came out not too long ago from Nate Moore pretty much saying that this film, after he passes away and we get that year jump, this takes place not too far from No Way Home and Eternals, and it's in conjunction with or concurrent with Thor Love and Thunder. So then that now puts us at 2025. So again, I'm going to try to find an article and put on the screen now, but just for those, because I'm a time head, I like to know where time is, where we are in the timeline. So I think we're in 2025 in this narrative, in this story, in the MCU timeline. That's where we're at. But as I digress, we see that Shuri is burying herself in the work. She's continuously innovating new technology, working on technology. She's just, again, grief. Some people, that's how they handle it. They bury themselves in their work so they can not think about it. And I've been there as someone that's lost someone close to me that tries to find ways to get your mind off of it. My one suggestion or thing that I thought would have been helpful to kind of give Shuri as a character moment or development within that year, and this ties to one of my issues with how Shuri and Namor have their fight later in the film. I would have liked if Ryan would have just given us one line to show us that she's been trained to fight. Now, we're going to get into this a little bit later, but the reason I say that, and I don't need a Rocky montage. I don't need Shuri running up the mountains of Wakanda or fighting lions in the forest. I just thought it would have been a nice little cue to prepare us for what happens later in the film, to say, this past year, not only has she been, and this is part of her character, she loves technology. This is who we know as Shuri in the MCU. She's a tech head, and I respect that. But going back to what I wish they would have built on the character to make me believe her fighting Namor later in the film is, within this year, she's been coming to Okoye saying, hey, I want to be on the field. I want to learn more. I want to learn how to protect myself. I want to fight more because, again, I know for someone that has suffered grief, sometimes some people not only challenging in their work, but then they put themselves in positions of, I want to lay the pain on people. I want to fight people. I want to get hit. I want to, have kind of channeling this anger and letting it out physically. So I would have liked if they would have gave us one little line of Okoye saying, no, the queen says you cannot go on these missions, but she was secretly training her. Even if Okoye didn't do it, Anika, who was played by Michaela Cole's character. I would have liked if she would have been the character that was secretly training the princess, which ties into, hey, I gave you these weapons as a thanks for helping me train. What I'm getting at is, and we'll talk about it later, I didn't buy into the fact that Shuri was just able to fight Namor, was able to jump on the side of the Wakanda ships and fighting the Telecons. Understanding that the herb gives you the abilities of super strength, reflexes, speed, all that stuff, but it doesn't just enhance, you don't just know how to fight all of a sudden, right? We'll talk about that later. As I get back to the breakdown, We see that, again, she's been working. She's abandoned the herb. She's no longer working on it because, again, she's losing her faith. She doesn't believe in a lot of the stuff now, which is something that her character goes through. But let's get into some of the good stuff here. We kind of talked, we've been sitting in kind of the negatives. Let's get into some good stuff here. So this is where we're seeing the queen being the queen of Wakanda. And one of my favorite scenes in this movie, you see her dealing with the international pressures to share vibranium from the other nations. And she says the line, "We're not going to misuse our power. I'm afraid how you all," speaking of the U.S. government and the UN nations, "how you all would abuse the power," as we cut her being... We're going to get to Angela Bassett just being so powerful and what they do to her in this film, which I cannot believe. We'll talk about that later. But we see them cutting this scene with her talking to them, and she finds out that it was the French people. They cut that between going to a Wakandan outpost, and we see they were 10 steps ahead of them. We see that the Dora Milaje was prepared. We see Okoye. We see Anika. We see Ayo. They fighting and taking out them pretty easily. It's a pretty easy handoff. And I just loved the queen when she just says, we spared your people. Go ahead and bring them in here, right? And take this as a warning. Next time you all attack us, ain't no more warnings. We're going to come for your head, which we'll talk about Valentina and the government a little bit later. But oh my goodness, that scene, the powerness, the regalness of Angela Bassett, and then just seeing, again, the Dora Milaje, anytime they're in action, they have jurisdiction anywhere and everywhere they go. I love that scene so much. Let me know what you all thought about that opening. At this point, we got past the funeral, and now we're kind of really getting into the minutia of the story. I'm like, okay, I'm liking what we're doing, Ryan. So far. We'll get into some more of the negatives a little bit later, but as we move further on to the narrative, we go from that awesome scene to arguably my favorite scene in the entire film. This scene to me is one of the best introductions to Telecon. I thought that their introduction was fantastic, but in particularly Namor. Setting up the scene, we see Lake Bill's character, who I don't know if they give her a name, but she's a scientist that works for the government. They have come across the location of vibranium that was buried deep in the ocean, and we see the horror come out in this scene here. This is one of the most darkest scenes we've gotten in the MCU in quite a long time. They're under the water, and they have their two people under the water, and I would assume that this was Telecon or Namor. He got a jellyfish to distract them while they kill the one guy, which, again, this is straight out of a horror movie. The one woman loses her communication. Lake Bell and them are freaking out at this point. And this is where we get the terrifying moment. Number one, the guy being taken away was pretty like, oh, okay, this is all right now. This was terrifying. We start to see the Telecons use their powers, which one of their powers is this very haunting chant. Now, at first, let me know if y'all thought the same thing. When they were doing the chant, I thought it was the score of the film, which I'm like, this is kind of loud and very abrasive, which I was like, okay, this is setting up the scene, right? It's setting the mood, but it wasn't the score. That's their chant. And as you see in this scene, when you hear their chant, you lose all your abilities and you take your own life. We see these people on the ship jumping off the ship and drowning. Bruh, that was some dark. Again, I'm a horror fan, so I'm like, okay, Ryan Coogler, where you at with the horror vibes, man? I thought that scene was haunting and very scary. And then eventually Lake Bill realized you put the earplugs in, they try to escape. Telecon, she's shooting them, they're not dying. It's like, this is a zombie movie now. Then we get the introduction of El Cuckoo Khan. He is in the sky, takes their helicopter, throws it in the water, kills them. And they don't show you his face, but I love how they pan up. And again, the score is going on right now. Now this is the score. And to me, for any kaiju fans out there, that score that they gave him whenever he was like in his dark mode, his evil mode, his villainous role, it was very reminiscent to Godzilla. Correct me if I'm wrong if y'all got similar vibes, but I felt like it was very, very bombastic and very Godzilla-like when you heard him on screen when he was doing his shit. And poof. Great introduction. Great introduction. Let me know what you all thought about the introduction of Telecon and El Cuckoo Khan Namor. Let's talk about that in the comment section. And also, too, not to leave out, the government thinks that the Wakandans did this. So, surprised that they didn't have any like surveillance cameras. I know that the one camera from the guy in the water was cut off, but they would have saw that weren't Wakandans. But again, they could have just blamed Wakanda because they didn't know who these people were. So they could have thought that, whatever. we move on. So now at this point in the film, we get Shuri and her mom showing her the ritual of how she's kind of passed, or not passed, but how she's dealing with losing her son in T'Challa, and this ritual that she's come about, which consists of taking his attire from the funeral and burning it, and not forgetting him, but just kind of passing on, transitioning on to accepting the loss, right? And she tries to carry this on to Shuri, but again, like I mentioned earlier, she refuses this, and she says it was kind of, I felt bad for her, but I understand where she's coming from, because again, I've lost many people in my life, but it was, and all of them have a special spot and affected me in a certain way. But one person in particular that passed away in my life really kind of shook my core. And you have moments of disbelief of things that you normally believed in, or just, you know what I'm talking about. You can all relate if you guys have suffered a big loss in your life. But I related to Shuri, because she's like, when her mom's saying how she uses this as a comfort, and Shuri's like, Mom, it's just a construct of your mind that you're making up to make you have this relief. So I thought that was it was a cold line, but it was something that I understood where she was coming from. And again, as I said in my non-spoiler review, I appreciated Letitia Wright's portrayal of grief and seeing all the ranges of emotion she gave us. My issue with Letitia Wright in this film was I never felt like she was the actual lead of this film, and I also felt like certain things, especially fighting Namor, certain other things, were just didn't feel as developed and didn't really execute the development of the character like I think they should have, and especially being that it's almost 3 hours long. But as we get into it, back into the discussion here, again, she's talking about the construct in her mind, and this is where Namor emerges from the water, and he has the vessel. And listen, I'm okay with them sneaking into Wakanda once, right? And especially because it's Namor. He's a pro at it. He's been around for 1,500 years or whatever the case may be. So he can sneak around Wakanda. I'm okay with it once, not later in the film, which we'll talk about. But he comes up and he tries to create this alliance, showing like, hey, I took care of this machine that can detect vibranium, which, by the way, to their surprise, they find out that vibranium's not just in Wakanda. At first, they're like, no, we don't believe you, whatever. But then Shuri's like, no, Mom, he's covered in vibranium, which we'll talk about his origins a little bit later. But, he tells them that by you opening up your doors now has made us vulnerable. And that line to me sets the stage for his path on why he's doing what he's doing. And it makes so much sense. And we'll talk about his origins later. And again, because when I saw this film for the first time, I'm like, man, he has a lot of hatred. If you had all this hate in you, bro, why are you now just striking the surface land? But it goes back to his line right now in this scene. By you all opening your gates, you've made us vulnerable. We were cool. We were good in our underwater cities, taking care of our people. But now that you've opened the gate for vibranium, now people are scouring the earth for vibranium, and now they're at my front door. So that's kind of the path that he's on, and why he is so gun-ho on wiping out the surface, because now his people are in harm's way because of Wakanda. So that's what I kind of got away from that moment of his path for the rest of this film. But as they're having this discussion, again, he tells them, make an alliance. I want you to find the scientist that built this machine, which I'm like, Namor, you could probably have done it yourself, but he's just, making that relationship. I do something for me. I scratch your back, you scratch mine. Shout out to Superbad. He says, find a scientist, give him to me. I'm going to kill them, and we'll work together. Very gangster, very gangster. But shout out to Queen Ramona. She was just like, boy, you better get your feathered feet ass, long ass ears. Anyway, she takes that, and they're kind of shocked, right? Now they have to, and also too, he says, don't tell anyone about my existence. That's another key thing. So as that is happening, this plot here to me was so unnecessary. This plot here to me was Age of Ultron, Avengers Age of Ultron all over again. And I'm referring to Everett Ross and the whole U.S. government agent, or U.S. government angle to the story. Ross gives the location to find Riri Williams, and I'll put a pin in this Ross thing, because we'll talk a little bit about it a little bit later, but I'm just letting y'all know now. I wasn't a fan of the Ross, Valentina, U.S. government. The only thing that it did in this film was to set up Phase 5, Thunderbolts, Captain America, New World Order, some of Riri Williams' show, as well as Armored Wars. That's the only purpose of Ross being in this film, as well as Valentina. We'll put a pin in that. But they're now at MIT. Okoye, Shuri's like, hey, I want to be on the field, which goes back to my suggestion a little bit earlier. Like, she's been wanting to be on the field for she can let some of that anger out and you know, obviously get her mind off of losing her brother as well. But she's like, hey, can I go? And Okoye convinces the queen of her first disapproval. Remember that, because Okoye gets a woo-wee. She gets her ass handed to her both ways. Literally, she gets her beat up a little bit later. She gets a lashing a little bit later too. Okoye got a lot of L's that she took. I love Okoye, but we'll get to her later. But they find Riri, who we get to see her. I likened her introduction to the MCU to Peter Parker in Civil War when Tony Stark got him. Very, you know, joyful kid. She's 19, super intelligent. Get Riri. She has to get her laptop at the lab, and this is where we get our second big action set piece of the film, which was really awesome. I connect this was kind of an homage to the first Black Panther, because we know in that film with Black Panther, T'Challa on the roof and them using the car chase sequences, but this is like kind of a, you know, sequels. They recreate some of the big moments of the first film and do it better. And I like this chase sequence. Let me know what you all thought of it here. But we see them in the streets. Riri has her suit now, very bulky, and I wasn't a fan of any of the suits in the film, like Dominique Thorne. I'm excited to watch Ironheart and to see her upgrade Mach 3, Mach 4, Mach 5, but I didn't like her suits in this film. I'm just gonna put that out there now. But I liked her as a character. I just felt like her character was kind of forgotten about as the film kind of went along. She became less of a focal point, more of a character that just happened to be just standing around at later points of the film. But we get the car chase. They outrun the government, but then they unfortunately run into those telecons. And listen, y'all, I said it in my review and I'm gonna say it again, everything about telecon was fantastic. It was the best elements of the film to me. Like, telecon to me looked better, like was presented better in this film than Wakanda. I'm just gonna put that out there. That's just my personal opinion. But they come out on Wells, like they and you know, a lot of people are going to compare Telecon to obviously Aquaman and obviously Atlantis, which they switched up the origins from what Namor comes from in the comics to the MCU, understandably so. They don't want too much overlap, and they separate themselves because in Aquaman we know Orm and his goons were coming on ships and all that technology stuff, but they're like, we're using whales and sharks. I thought that just everything about Telecon was just fire, minus a couple nitpicks that we'll talk about a little bit later. But they ambush them on the bridge. You know, Shuri gets knocked out. She has her, you know, Tony Stark kind of moment when she uses the shield, nanobots from her beads. Meanwhile, Riri Williams gets knocked down. She gets unconscious, so they're knocked out. Meanwhile, Okoye, I love her so much, man. She's looking at, it was her versus three of the warriors, and then the two leaders, Namor and Atuma. She ain't blinking an eye. She's like, make one more step and I'm killing all y'all. And she kept her promise pretty much. She killed three of them, and I'm kind of confused. So before we get to my confusion, she fights Atuma. He lays her out pretty easily. I love that fight, and I love like their banter throughout the film and warrior. I love all that stuff. But going back to my confusion, how do you kill telecons? Because she stabbed them with a vibranium spear, which the way I'm assuming their origins works is you can kill them with vibranium, like a werewolf with a silver bullet or a vampire to a stake to the heart or whatever. But they revive them like zombies. So I'm like, how, again, some of the lore was a little convoluted. I just didn't fully understand how you, besides them taking away their water source and all that stuff. But I'm like, can you physically kill them with something? Because later on in the film, Nakia shoots them with something that she didn't think was going to kill them. So I was just kind of confused on how to kill a telecon on land without, you know, water being their main source of survival. But anyway, she kills them. They wake them back up. Meanwhile, at this point, Riri's still knocked out. But Shuri wakes up, and by this point, Okoye's off on the bridge, kicked into the water because Atuma gave her. By the way, for you all that don't know, Atuma is very powerful. Again, if they take some of the comic book origins, he's just as strong as the Hulk, if not stronger, and at some points can be stronger than Namor. Anyway, she's in the water, and she's awake, and she like invites herself, like, hey, don't kill her. Take me with you. I would like to talk to your king, which, you know, they ultimately do. Meanwhile, Okoye, ooh-wee, this is the moment here, unfortunately, that they took Shuri. Queen doesn't hold back. In the scene, the power of Angela Bassett grasping your attention. When the elders are like, hey, you know, we probably shouldn't go after her, giving her suggestions, like, Y'all need to shut the hell up. Have y'all not realized I've lost my husband, my son, now my daughter? I've lost everything. Meanwhile, Okoye is like, you know, being stripped of her Dora Milaje general, stripped of her pride, stripped of her, you know, just everything was taken away from her. And shout out to both of them, because she really, it hit her hard. Missed opportunity though. Again, we spending time on all the Everett Ross and some of these plots just didn't add up. I would have loved to have seen where was her first place where she went. Because we see in this very scene, in Kaluuya's character, they mention him that she can visit him if she wants. Did she visit him when she got stripped of all of her honor? You have parents that are still alive. Does she have siblings? I would have loved to have seen, like, what does Okoye do when she's not kicking ass, right? That would have been a nice little moment. Again, 3 hours to build out these supporting characters. Because if y'all don't remember, Kevin Feige said it.
To honor the legacy that Chad helped us build through his portrayal of the King of Wakanda, we want to continue to explore the world of Wakanda and all of the rich and varied characters introduced in the first film.
When they're not going to have to challenge their story, it was going to be more supporting characters were going to be upgraded to leads, and Wakanda was going to be built out. That promise was not kept, because I said it in my review, and I'm going to say it again. The supporting characters probably had just as little time in this film as they did in the first one. It doesn't make sense at all to me. But I digress. So at this point, we go back to Shuri's awake, Riri's awake. She wants to have a conversation she wants to make sure that Riri survives. She is introduced to Namor, and he gives her a very good origin story, if you ask me. Going over the origin story, we see that he was born in the 1500s, if I'm not mistaken, and one of their shamans gets a message from their god that, you know, because their tribe is dying out, go find this herb underwater, which he does. They want Namor's mom to take it, but she's like, I'm pregnant. I don't want to risk my life and my child's life from this power that you think we can find. I don't remember how they convinced her. I think they just like showed them, or no, you know what? I think the convincing was, if you do take this, we're going to guarantee that your son, your unborn son, will be our leader moving forward. So I think that was how they convinced her, because obviously it was still kind of hard, because you didn't know if you were going to live or die. So like, what's the point of me taking this offer if I'm going to end up dying? It's a 50-50 chance. But anyway, they convinced her to take it. She takes it. They initially die, but then they rise back up, and then they realize, okay, this drinking vibranium has given us new abilities. They have super strength. They don't have the ability to breathe above surface, so this is where they kind of adapt the water. And then we get the birth of Namor with the feathered wings. The ears are up, and he even says when he's talking to Shuri, I was a mutation. I was a mutant. Much different than the comics from what I remember. I'm not saying I'm a Namor expert, but I'm pretty confident that wasn't his same origin stories, and I don't think he has vibranium running through his veins. As the story goes on in his origin, his mother, unfortunately, now with him being a mutant, he has not only superhuman strength and ability to be on Earth and below surface and breathe on Earth and below surface, he also has the ability to age slowly, but unfortunately that doesn't pass on to his mother, who's at this point older. She's dying. Her last request was to be buried at her homeland, and he wants to keep that promise for his mother, so he goes onto the surface. Which, by the way, I'm very curious. Again, we're going to probably get a Namor series or a movie to kind of flesh out more of his origins. Like, how often did he visit the surface land? But either way, this one time he does, as a young boy, he sees what has taken place. Namor now at the surface land, and he sees that indigenous people are being enslaved by the Spanish settlers. He kills them. This is where he gets his name, and I can't remember what they call him. It was like El Nico something, where it's essentially like he's a demon or something of that nature. And that's where he adapts his name, No More Love for the Surface Land, aka Namor. So I thought that Origins was very awesome. So just bringing it back a little bit again, mutation. Let me know how you all like how they explain his superhuman abilities, how he is a mutant. And again, we don't know how mutants work in the MCU quite yet, how the mutation spreads. If it was like WandaVision, when we learned that Wanda was a witch when she was a kid. If you all remember that episode when the missile didn't go off, it was because she stopped that missile from going off. But having the Infinity Stone kind of ignited her abilities, right? I wonder if it takes something to ignite the X gene within you. And there's X-Men around the world, but they just haven't had that spark quite yet. And the spark being for Namor was drinking vibranium kind of enhance his mutant abilities. I don't know. Let me know what you thought about that. Meanwhile, we go to Now, this is an interesting moment. Now, as I'm recording this, and shout out to Brandon from Just My Opinion Reviews and E-Man from E-Man Movie Reviews. We had a 2-hour discussion about this film, and I'm pretty sure by the time my video is out, Brandon's would be out. So you can hear more of this conversation in that video. But we had a conversation, and I didn't realize this after seeing it one time, but E-Man pointed out when the Queen goes to visit Nakia, the first kid that interacts with her is actually T'Challa, the Prince T'Challa. I didn't realize that. I'll have to rewatch it. And I trust E-Man has seen it 3 times, so I take his word from it. But when he said that, I'm like, wait a minute. And you'll see it in Brandon's video. We're like, wait, that makes no sense, because if she's seeing her grandson, she would have been like, hey, and hugging him and whatnot. But in the movie, she just walks, he says, bonjour and hello to her in French or whatever. She's like, oh, hey, and just walks by him and goes to Nakia. I'm like, yes, because remind you, the way that the placement of the film is, she knew about Prince T'Challa at that point in the film, because if you all remember, she says something a little bit later in the film where, like, I have to tell you a secret about your brother. She knew about the prince, right? T'Challa. So it is weird that they didn't have that interaction. But as I said in that video, and I'm going to say it to you all now, taking that aside, knowing that the queen knew that Nakia had a son, this scene to me feels kind of out of place and out of character for the queen. As she goes to Nakia, you're the only person I know that can infiltrate anything, and I want you to save Shuri and go into Telecon and save my daughter. That is out of character to me, because a mother talking to another mother saying, can you save my daughter, risking your life, not knowing the defenses of Telecon, not knowing what could have happened to her, seems out of place. I know desperate times calls for desperate measures. She didn't have any other, which, again, you have the Dora Milaje to your disposal. You could have sent Okoye. Well, Okoye was stripped of her power. You could have sent another trained Dora Milaje person to go do this mission for you, or hell, this could have been a cameo for some Marvel character. I'm just obviously being funny now, but to me, in all seriousness, I found that to be out of character for Ramona to go to her, another mother to another mother, knowing how important this Nakia is to your son, to you, and also knowing that she's a mom. I just found it really weird that Queen Ramona would be like, can you do this suicide mission for me? Even though you could die, and another character die in this film is just tragic in itself. But I just found that scene to be weird, knowing that, again, even taking aside if she knows that the kid was right there, just knowing that she is a mother just didn't make sense to me. Let me know your thoughts on all that. But Nakia agrees to do it because it's her mother-in-law, and also it's her sister-in-law, and she wants to be helpful. Meanwhile, let me get to the Ross point. So this is where Ross is dealing with the CIA agent who we learned earlier in the film is Valentina, and then MC, and this points to my case exactly of, like, the MCU just sometimes gets too much ahead of itself. Valentina and him used to be married, whatever. It's a little funny line she says, but they're looking at what's going on in Boston. Meanwhile, Ross is talking to the Queen, and we'll talk about him getting arrested a little bit later, but I just want to get this point out right now. Everything with Ross, Valentina, U.S. government, and later on in the film, she says that this was her dream, to be able to have vibranium to her disposal and have this new world order. Again, everything of that plot has to do with nothing to serve this film. It only serves the building of Phase 5. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if this has ramifications in Secret Invasion as far as Valentina goes. Ironheart, the Armored War series, as well as Captain America New World Order and Thunderbolts. That's the only reason that they were in the film, which my negative issue with that is it could have been taken away from the movie and focused more on the world building. Wakanda, other tribes, other politics going on in Wakanda. Okoye, Nakia, M'Baku, Ayo, and Ika. All that stuff that we gave to Ross could have been given to them, could have been given to Shuri to build out her character, to build her growth, her development, the anger, the rage, the training to fight. It was a waste of time. Let me know what you all felt about Valentina and Ross and the government. And also, it also sets up, I forgot to mention, Black Panther 3, U.S. government versus Wakanda, maybe Doom Wars, so on and so forth. Again, it's nice. It's going to play out, obviously, but I'm just like, it's a detriment to this film because it took away from other stuff that could have made this film more well-rounded, in my opinion. getting back to the breakdown, we're in Telecon. Shuri begins to see the similarities of the two cultures, and she wants to spare Riri's life. Obviously, it will keep her in Wakanda, more machines and whatnot, but unfortunately, Namor is like, nah, bruh. First off, she's in my house. Second off, she knows where, the capabilities of building these machines. I can't risk it. And this is where my issues with Namor comes about, because if you really felt that she was a threat, why are you bringing her to your front door? I'm referring to Riri. If you really feel like she was a threat, you're going to bring her to your front door. Why is she still alive? Again, I know this was like a bargaining between like peaceful negotiations. Bring her to us. We'll kill her. We'll be partners moving forward. But it's just like, you got to establish your dominance, Namor. You kill her, Riri, and say, this is what it is. But, and this is a plot issue, in particular, it's called plot armor. Nothing was going to happen to Riri because she has a series, which, again, Marvel gets ahead of themselves sometimes. Why even announce her series? I know you want to build hype, get people excited, but don't announce it if you're going to just, put that in our face, because we know that she was going to survive this film. Her plot armor was as thick as vibranium, as I said in my review. So getting back into it, it's like, I'm going to give you some more time to think about it, and I'm going to give you this, Telecon bracelet that I believe his mom gave him. It meant something to him, so he gives her that as kind of like a sign of good faith, right? Meanwhile, Queen now has, we have Nakia, who's talking to the villagers. She's able to find a location, which I'm going to give Telecon an L on this one. Your security. Why are people able to find your hidden caves and just go into your front door? Later more, you need to fire those people. And we'll talk about Wakanda also slipping up. I found that to be, again, plot holes. Anyway, she manages to find Shuri. Meanwhile, Namor is talking to the Queen on the surface. She makes like, hey, give me my daughter back. He's like, nope, she knows where I live. We're going to keep her for a while. And he tells her, if you send someone, one of your ships, one of your spies, I'm not only going to kill you, which he keeps that promise later on, and I hate that scene. We'll talk about it. I'm going to kill you, and Wakanda will be the first nation that falls. While that's happening, that's when Nakia saves Shuri and Riri, but before she saves them, she kills one of the Telecons, which, again, I don't know how they work. You shoot them, you stab them, they could die, they can live, they can be risen again. It's kind of confusing, but she kills them, and Shuri was like, no, I need to help her because this will be an act of violence, an act of war, and she's like, we got to go. Unfortunately, they go. While that's happening, unfortunately, this is where Namora is like, she's hyping Namor up. Like, first off, you let them come into our home. Second off, you lost one of our people, and you are vulnerable. We're vulnerable. You want to protect us. You're our king, and this is how you treat us. I'm obviously paraphrasing and putting it in my own words, but essentially, she's egging him on to show them who you are, right? Kind of the reverse of what the Queen says to Shuri a little bit later. So he's pissed at this point. And when you see a pissed Namor, this is what happens. They attack Wakanda, which in the comics is very accurate. Meanwhile, Shuri, Okoye, M'Baku, Nakia, the Queen, Dora Milaje, all of them are trying to save people at this point because Wakanda is being flooded, which the way that they captured that was pretty scary and anyone could have died. And someone does. As this is happening, we get the confrontation between M'Baku, who, let's just call it what it is, completely wasted in this film. I remember Wilson Duke said that he had a contract extension to get more of a prominent role in the MCU. It wasn't for this project, only to assume that he is one of those announced Wakanda series is going to be him, and we'll talk about him being the king later, but it's going to probably be not just a straight up M'Baku series, but he's going to be more prominent, hopefully, because he was wasted in this movie. He takes a blow. Well, first off, he fights one of the Telecons, throws them, and I love M'Baku. He just was wasted, and a lot of characters were wasted in this film. But he gets the blow, and I thought that they killed him. I'm like, damn, Ryan Coogler, you just killing all the dudes in this movie, man. I thought that they killed M'Baku when he took that blow to the chest because I thought that he stopped his heart, but luckily he was okay. He's off the board, during this flood, which I'm surprised he didn't drown. But neither here nor there. We see Namor wrecking shop. He's hopping around, killing, blowing up ships, doing all this stuff. Whew, this pains me to say this because it's baffling. He comes face to face with the Queen. He throws a spear at the throne room, doesn't break it, and he takes his water balloons, water grenades, blows up the defenses. Water is emerging in the throne room. The queen saves Riri, who's drowning. She was going to be fine. She has a series. I was hoping and praying that when this moment was happening, that Ryan was just going to make her, be in a coma to the end of the movie and come back later on. She was going to be badly injured, but not dead. Ryan Coogler, please explain. I hope someone asked him this in one of the press rooms with the spoilers. Why on earth would you kill Angela Bassett? Now, again, shout out to Brandon. We talked about this for like 15, 20 minutes, like coming up with reasons, like maybe, and again, you can watch the full video of Brandon's video, which I'll probably put in the description of this video. We tried to make reasons, okay? Shout out to Angela Bassett. She's such an accomplished individual, director, writer, obviously actor, producer, theater work. She's in her 60s, and you couldn't tell me that because she is gorgeous. Shout out to her. Black don't crack. She just wants to move on. She wants to do other things in her life, right? So I've done Black Panther. I've done a What If episode. I've done other cameos. I'm in this film. I've done my service. I would like to respectfully leave the franchise. Reason number one, potentially. Reason number two, and E-Man alluded to this, Ryan Coogler seems to have a very common theme in a lot of his movies, especially movies he writes, and that is death, a lot of death, and particularly parents dying, and how that motivates the main character. Creed, obviously first Black Panther with T'Chaka dying, and now in this film. So it's a trope that Ryan seems to really lean on a lot, is killing characters to motivate other characters, which is not, it's like, we got to do something new, Ryan, right? So we talked about that. But then it's just like, why double down on all these prominent characters dying? Obviously, we talked about T'Challa, and I have my thoughts on that. Recast T'Challa still. Why? And I said it in Brandon's video. I'm going to say it here to you all. I don't normally get reactions when I'm watching movies. I'm a pretty cool, calm, collective dude. Sometimes, you get a jump scare, you get a reaction. I laugh when it's a funny movie. I get excited. I tear up when I get emotional, but I don't normally be like, what? When she died, I almost wanted to walk out of the theater. 100% honest with you all, because I just couldn't believe what I'm seeing on screen. And then not only does she die, I felt like when she died, we only spent a scene, 2 scenes at max, 5 minutes, 7 minutes total of the character who's been leading this film, if you ask me. Because like I said, I don't feel like Shuri was the lead. She becomes more of the lead at this point in the film, which is 2 hours into the movie. But, man, you kill her. And again, I wasn't expecting the whole T'Challa funeral and have a 20-minute scene, but it's just I didn't feel like the ramifications. Obviously, like I said, Ryan Coogler, and like Eman said, it's now propelling her to be who she's going to be in the rest of the film. I'm referring to Shuri, but you've already set that stage, Ryan. You've already killed off T'Challa. You've already, not only is her brother died, her nation's being flooded, and her mom could have just been badly injured. That's all you had to do. You didn't have to go the extra step to kill off the queen. Let me know your thoughts on that scene. I hated it. I hated that scene. Art is subjective. I hated that scene so much. Let me know what you all thought about that. It baffles me. But getting back to the breakdown, M'Baku's trying to talk her down, trying to calm her down, talk about T'Challa wanted me to protect you, give her advice, but now she's on this path of now she's grieving 2 times now, or 3 times. She's lost her dad, lost her brother, and now she's lost her mom. She's just losing things left and right now. So now she's on the path for vengeance and blood. While that's happening, we see that Nakia is talking to her. She's now more motivated to feed that, okay, we need a protector. We need a Black Panther. Which, again, I remember all the rumors, the Queen was going to be a Black Panther, Nakia was going to be a Black Panther. There was going to be all these Black Panthers filmed, and it wasn't. I knew that wasn't going to be the case. But anyway, she's like, we need a protector. And now this is Shuri. She takes the Telecon bracelet, she takes the DNA from T'Challa, and she infuses it and recreates the herb. She takes the herb as we know the tradition, and I think some of us knew this was coming, especially if y'all remember a couple years ago. Michael B. Jordan said that he would be open to coming back. That was sign number 1. Number 2 for me that he was coming back in this film is him and Ryan Coogler. He's all Ryan Coogler movies feature Michael B. Jordan in some capacity. So I figured that he was going to come back. He does. As she goes to the ancestral plane and she's looking to see for her mother, she finds Killmonger. Now, the reason I assumed that this was much different than T'Challa going to the astral plane and all that stuff was because remember that this is a modified herb. This isn't the true, essence of the herb. This is Telecon bracelet, DNA from T'Challa, so it's definitely modified. So it's a different experience than what we've seen in the first Black Panther. So that kind of explains why it's much different than the previous ones. But also, the reason she sees, and this is how I interpreted the scene, the reason she sees Killmonger and not T'Challa, well, for obvious reasons, they said they weren't going to recreate him. He's not going to be in the film. I knew that. But the reason she didn't see her mom is because subconsciously, and Michael B. Killmonger says it, and shout out to Michael B. Jordan, he still has that charisma. He's still playing to the Killmongerisms. He still has that swag to him. I really enjoyed this scene. But subconsciously, she wanted to find Killmonger because she knows, as Killmonger says, your dad was a hypocrite. Your brother is too noble. You know who can get this job done. You know you had to come to me. Even though she's like, we're nothing alike. It's like we have more in common, cousin, than you want to put on. So she meant to call T'Challa because she wants to go on this path. She knew she had to talk to someone that's about that business. She comes out, doesn't tell Nakia who she saw, but now she punches the mannequin and she has the strength now of the Black Panther, which I repeat, you get the strength, heightened senses, reflexes, and all that stuff, but it doesn't give you the power to be able to do what she's going to do with fighting Namor. I, again, would have loved to have, you didn't have to give me a montage, but just allude to the fact that she has the capabilities of handling her own and hand-to-hand combat, which she just magically gets it in this film. Again, we'll get to that a little bit later. But as we go into that scene, she now talks to the elders. She now does, and I couldn't have been the only one, when her and M'Baku, who was testing her strength, were doing the arm wrestling, I thought of the Predator. I can't think of Arnold's name or Apollo Creed's name in the film, but that when they did that reminded, I know it wasn't meant to be that. It was meant to show that she's stronger than M'Baku, but she tells the elders, this is the plan, M'Baku, I don't care about you and talking about I need to not kill. And he's like, if we kill El Kukulkan, the feathered serpent god, that's a war forever. Shuri's like, I don't give a damn. We'll fight and fight forever if that's the case, because she's now on this path of vengeance. So they come up with the plan, which I do appreciate. And then going back to Riri, I said how I felt like she was just kind of forgotten about. And at this point in the film, after she's, they sacrificed Ramona to save her, she's now just kind of sitting around. She's just in the background now. But going back to Riri and the relationship she has with Shuri, I did like the sisters, the science sisters. They come up with the idea like we can beat him by getting him away from the water. They create the machine to, they lure him in the machine. Meanwhile, and shout out to E-Man who brought this up, Wakanda takes some L's. Not only, I forgot to mention that they were able to sneak into Wakanda 2 times in this film. I know they have vibranium, they can't detect them, but after Namor came into Wakanda, you would have thought that their defenses would have been on an all-time high. But I digress. Riri and Shuri come up with the plan, and even, like I said, brought this up, that their plan was to go on this ship on water. Telecons, this is their land. This is to their advantage. Why are you not on planes? Why are you using this ship? And even if you're going to use a ship, why couldn't the ship come off of the water? Whoever thought that was stupid, as Eman says in the review that we have with Brandon. But that's their plan. They end up luring him in. And like I said, and I'll give it credit. It was cool to see her fight. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here saying seeing her fight is unbelievable. I love the scenes. It's just, it wasn't earned. It's like, when we met Shuri, she's a scientist in the lab. Not once have we ever seen her combat. And I know y'all gonna say, what about 2018? She literally, she's shooting her gauntlets. She's not fighting Killmonger like hand to hand. Where did this come from? Anyway, she has a badass scene. She's fighting them on the side of the ship. She eventually lures Namor into the ship. He's realizing that he's losing. He takes his, I think that the AI said he had raw vibranium, so he destroys the ship. They end up on the sea. And I've said it 1,000 times in this breakdown, I would have been okay if Shuri would have used her brains to fight Namor, but the fact that she was going toe-to-toe, and I understand Namor was probably, let's say, 40% capacity, which 40% is still better than anything that an untrained Shuri can go toe-to-toe. The scene to me reminded me so much of Kate Bishop going toe-to-toe with Kingpin, which just is mind-baffling that the MCU sometimes dumbs down characters, lowers their power skills just to, suit that character in that film. Doctor Strange, No Way Home. I know y'all gonna say Peter Parker's, physics. No, he's in the mirror dimension and he could beat Doctor Strange. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent here. He fights him. Now, he is handling her for the most part, but I still didn't think it was like believable that she was going toe to toe on the physical level with him. But anyway, and this was unbelievable, she gets stabbed with his raw vibranium, no blood on the stab, takes it out of her stomach, and now he's wounded. She has the opportunity to kill him, but then this is where she has the flashes of seeing her mother, seeing T'Challa, and it reminded me so much of Civil War when T'Challa could have killed Zemo. Vengeance has consumed us both. And she says essentially the same thing to him, and she spares his life. And also, too, I forgot to leave out because it was so forgettable. And this is kind of going back, but she gives Riri's fighting, which again, I don't like her costume. Hopefully she gets a huge upgrade in her show. They're fighting, but also the Midnight Angels have their suits, and that's Okoye and Nakia. So they only had 2 suits, which I think they're going to build out the Midnight Angels in a series later on. But they're fighting and whatnot. And I didn't like their suits, by the way, but I did like Okoye fighting Atuma again. I like that fight. But anyway, getting back to yield, and I'll make sure that your people are safe and we can have somewhat of an understanding. He yields. I'm like, really, Namor? Really? I guess, you got to be smart. He wasn't a straight up villain until he killed the queen, which I'll always hold that against Namor. Unfortunately, Ryan Coogler, with you having him be the person that killed him, that's the only thing that I'll always remember about Namor. You son of a bitch, you killed the queen. Anyway, agree to that. The fight stops. They're, coming to alliance or whatever. And then this sets the stage for moving forward before we get to the mid-credit scene here. What's her name? Namora. And she's like, I can't believe you yielded. And I assume that if we do see Namor again, he's going to have his own problems with his own people, Namora and Atuma, because they feel like their king kind of punked out to losing to Shuri. Losing, number one, but also yielding and putting their people at the disadvantage. But he's like, well, it's, if we ever want to conquer the surface world, we have to have Wakanda on our side. So I think there's going to be a civil war there. But as we wrap up the film here, we get the moment with Baku, who I think is the king of Wakanda, because they're having a ceremony prepared for Shuri, but, he says that she's busy. I believe that scene alludes to he's going to be the king of Wakanda moving forward. Then we see, and I'm cool with that, again, because they nerfed my man. They gave him really pretty much, listen, because everyone did their job, even though it was limited roles, limited capacity of the characters. He had good scenes in this movie. I just wanted more of it, as well as Nakia and Okoye. I've said it 1,000 times at this point, but I like that he's the king now, because there was a lot of, and I know this is a big thing that a lot of people want to bring up, is the lack of a male presence in this film. So I like that at least they gave my man the king. And it could have been, and by the way, me saying that doesn't mean I didn't want Shuri to be the queen, and I love the queen that we already had. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I like that they at least gave him that to kind of build on in the future. I just want to make that clear. So as that's happening, Nakia had offered Shuri early in the film, when you're done taking care of your stuff, you got a home in Haiti with me. So she takes up her offer. So we end the film with her going there, and also Wakanda's rebuilding themselves. We get in Disney, and the whole representation is so lacking when it comes to the LGBTQ community. We get the brief hint at Leo and Anika. It's like, oh, my love, and kisses her. It's like, come on, man, y'all so ridiculous. Y'all could have just established their relationship. What was it, Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, where they had the two? It's just like, come on, Disney, we're 2022. Come on, man, be more aware. It's frustrating, man. But anyway, that happened. Wakanda's rebuilding, and they have their alliance and whatnot. But as we wrap up, we now have her, and this is a good callback, because it ties back to how they handle grief in this film. Shuri goes to Haiti. She goes to her home. She performs the ritual and the ceremony that her mom gave her with the clothes of T'Challa, meaning that she hasn't forgotten her brother, but she's able to move on, right? And going back to her in that moment, her mom said that when she did it, she heard the wind and the waves, and she heard T'Challa kind of put her hand on her back to guide her. That's the same thing that happens here. you know, good ending. I would say the third act plays out a lot better than the first film, because that was one of the biggest knocks on the first Black Panther, which I said it in my review, and I'm going to say it now. I prefer Black Panther 1 over this film all day, every day, because this film, as I've alluded to, has so many messy plot points and doesn't build the world like I wanted to, and does some questionable, very questionable things. Here's another one. Mid-credit scene. So we have Shuri do her ceremony, and Nakia walks up with her son, who I want to say is probably 5 or 6, probably 6, just thinking of the timeline. And he introduces himself, which means that they had the kid during the blip, or before T'Challa was blipped, I should say, in Infinity War. She had the, you know, she was pregnant with him during that and throughout Endgame. This is, you know, me and the king, your brother, decided to have him not, which was kind of weird that they were like, we didn't want him there because the pressure of being a king. It's like, first, I never got that impression that would have been the case, but neither here nor there. She says that was their decision. She knew that her T'Challa was dying, which goes back to the beginning when Shuri said he's fighting for his life. I'm not saying that you can't fight for your life, even though, you know, whatever the case may be, but I'm just like, he knew that he was dying, which again, it bleeds into the reality. Like, it made me think like of T'Challa or Chadwick Boseman, knew that he was dying, had his close ones, all that stuff. It's still kind of weird that T'Challa would have told his mom and his sister. Anyway, they thought it was good for them to live off the land or live at home and not have the pressure for, he says, I can't remember the name that he said he had, T'Chan or something like that, T'Chan or something, but his real name, his Wakanda name, is Prince T'Challa. Shuri, you know, she smiled, started to cry. He laughed. The little boy was adorable. I'm not coming at the little kid here. And I understand the scene. I understand what they're saying. This is T'Challa's legacy. I also see Nate Moore, Ryan Coogler, Kevin Feige say, hey, you recast T'Challa? How y'all like that? Do you like it? Do you like it? I don't like it at all. And we talked about it again, another self-promotion from my man B. Avery, but we talked about, if you're going to do this, which clearly they have done, you better work on this. You better build that little Prince T'Challa out to be T'Challa of the 616. Again, I personally think that we will get another T'Challa, not just this kid T'Challa. I do think Secret Wars will have another T'Challa get advanced, or I do believe if they use this kid as our T'Challa moving forward, which if he's 6, we got 10 years for that, but I do think we're going to get a big time jump, especially in Secret Wars. I do think they're going to age him up pretty quickly, and the Young Avengers and all that stuff, they better do that, right, if they're going to go the escape route. So you better work on it. So, yeah, it's just like and I know Eamon has a video on this, on compromising. I'm not a fan of it, but build that little boy up, y'all. I'm telling you. I'm an hour and 10 minutes in. That's all I have to say. Like I said, we're going to have more discussions on this. Let me know in the comments. If you're still here, y'all, I appreciate you. Again, I know this is raw, unedited, structured like some of my other videos. I went over all the scenes, what worked, what didn't work, and all that different stuff. If you're still here at this point in the video, do your boy a favor, show me support. Put in the comments right now, #recast T'Challa. Let me know your support there. But speaking of support, I thank you. If you stuck around to this point, I thank you for even clicking on this video. If this is your first time, welcome to the community. I want to have more discussions about this in the future. Again, if you all want to do a live call-in special, probably on Monday after the film is released, let me know in the comments. Let me know how you all feel about this video by liking, sharing, commenting, and of course, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for the support. Thank you for watching this video. More to come, as you can see on the screen now. Come and join the community. Check out my other MCU content. Check out my review for this film that's a little bit more structured. And we'll see you all on the next breakdown.